Thank you for joining us today for the Meritorious Military Series, State of the Firearms Industry. Today's panel is We're Standing Up for Gun Rights in 2022. Are you? It is my pleasure to first introduce our moderator, Lauren Hill. Lauren is the founder of ReelCamo Girl, a global community of sportswomen. Previously, she was the director of corporate communications for Firearms Policy Coalition, in charge of the major gift fundraising program, including the development and oversight of the organization's corporate donor program, the Constitution Alliance. She also worked in business development for Safari Club International. Thank you for joining us, Lauren.
Thanks for having me.
Our first panelist is Mark Oliva, Managing Director of Public Affairs at the National Shooting Sports Foundation, fondly known as NSSF, the Firearms Industry's trade association. He is responsible for NSSF's communications on policy, government relations, and legislative issues. Prior to joining NSSF, Mark served 25 years in the Marine Corps, joining in 1991 and retiring in 2017 at rank of Master Gunnery Sergeant. Mark served in public affairs in the Marine Corps, including a tour as a staff writer for Stars and Stripes newspaper on Okinawa, Japan. Mark's military career included deployment to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, Haiti, the Mediterranean Sea, and he participated in combat operations in multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Mark also saw service as a defensive legislative fellow to a Virginia congressman, and he was the advisor to the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for wounded warriors in both the Navy and the Marine Corps before he retired and started his career with NSSF. Thank you for joining us, Mark.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Catherine. Great to be here again.
Our second panelist is Philip Smith, founder and president of the National African American Gun Association. Philip is a graduate of the University of California at Davis. He is an African American gun enthusiast and community organizer. He founded and started NAGA with the primary goal to expose, educate, and motivate as many African American men and women to go out and purchase a firearm for self-defense and to take training on proper gun use. NAGA was officially started and launched on February 28, 2015 in honor of Black History Month, and now has over 45,000 members and 75 chapters in the United States. NAGA provides a network for all African American firearm owners, gun clubs, and outdoor enthusiasts. The organization welcomes people of all religious, social, and racial perspectives, and especially welcomes active and retired African American members of law enforcement and the military. Thank you for all of you for being here with us today. And Lauren, please take it away.
Oh, thank you very much, Mark. Nice to see you as always. And Phil, great to meet you. I think Phil might want to unmute your microphone quick at the bottom of the screen.
I'm here.
There you go.
Hi, everyone. How's everybody doing?
All right. Well, let's get started. I've got some questions here for you guys. I get the easy job today. Phil, can you please share with us the mission of the National African American Gun Association and why it was conceived and how it achieved such impressive growth over the last couple of years?
Sure. I'll give you a quick 10,000-foot view for everyone and the listeners as well. The organization was started in 2015, February 28th. And when I started the organization, I wanted an organization that our folks from our community could reach out to comfortably and have an understanding or be taught an understanding of firearms from a very basic level. And that's what we do. We're very, very good at teaching our folks about firearms. The organization has been able to grow to where it's at right now, basically 1,000 new members a month, more or less. Based on some very basic tenets that we try to do on a daily basis. Number one, everyone is welcome. Do we focus on issues in our community? Yes, but everyone is welcome. And when you join our organization, we're going to give you a big high five. We're going to give you a hug and maybe a kiss, depending who you are. And you're welcome. And that's the beauty. We don't judge anybody. You can be Republican, you can be Democrat, you can be whatever. And we're still going to allow you to be yourself and be very, very comfortable. And that's the overriding statement that people hear when they join our organization. You're very, very comfortable in your own skin, and we embrace that. And I think that's the kind of secret sauce in our organization. You can join us and get really good, solid, basic training, and at the same time be yourself. And I think that's very kind of a lost art nowadays.
I'd agree. Mark, similarly, can you share with us the mission of NSSF, who your members are, and your primary advocacy objectives?
Yeah, great. It's great to see you again, Phil, and great to see you again as well, Laura. And so it's the National Shooting Sports Foundation is a trade association, just like any other trade association that's out there. It just happens to be our product is guns and ammunition. So we represent all your major manufacturers, your distributors, your retailers, your ranges, even some endemic media that write about guns and hunting. We are the trade association that represents them. Most people will probably understand NSSF for our kind of our flagship event every year, SHOT Show, that's happening in Las Vegas. I think we're actually getting ready to open up registration for that shortly. I'm sure that those in the industry are looking forward to that as well. But we represent all the interests of the industry to be able to service the customers. So I think probably the best way for people to understand that is think of the gun counter as the dividing line. We do everything that is working to make sure that that gun can get to the counter. So making sure that the manufacturers are able to get the bar stock, they're able to ship that finished firearm to the distributor is able to get it to the retailer and get it to you at the gun counter. Once it crosses that gun counter, that's where you see a lot of the advocacy organizations like NRA, like Phillips Naga. Those are the groups that are taking up for you and your gun rights, representing you as the individual, whereas opposed to NSSF, we are representing the industry itself.
Perfect. So, Phil, what trends are you seeing across America given the rising crime and the varying perceptions of firearms in small towns and big cities?
I think I alluded to this in my Senate testimony. I think folks in general, regardless of color, are really waking up and really realizing, and I think COVID is probably the backdrop that's pushing folks to really think about their own safety, that you need to be able to protect yourself based on what's happening on the ground. When I say the ground, in America on a daily basis. If someone breaks into your house at 2 a.m, you don't have time typically to call a police officer. You have to be able to defend yourself right then and there, protect your family, your property, and your loved ones. And I think that's the overriding awareness, or what I said in the Senate testimony. People are awoke now. They're looking to, in a very legal and law-abiding fashion, be able to protect themselves based on some of the realities that America has faced in the last 3 or 4 years. And COVID is the big elephant in the room. That really prompted folks to take a step back and say, you know what? I think I need to consider buying a gun. And those are folks that are on the anti-gun side. They are now on the gun side. And I think that's a good thing for the 2A community. And I consider myself part of the 2A community. But this awareness that we're seeing on a daily basis, growing and getting more and more active within the country, I think is a very positive tilt for the gun industry. And I think we need to capitalize that and push that initiative. Because I love owning a gun. I like going to the range. I shoot all the time. I have a plethora of friends that I go with. And I think that type of movement is a good thing for the country if we can do that on a consistent basis.
Sure. And Mark, while we're seeing the explosive growth in new gun owners, a lot is happening behind closed doors that most will not ever be aware of. For example, recently Visa, MasterCard, Amex decided to add a new merchant category for firearms retailers. What does this mean, and how are merchant category codes for credit card purchases at firearm retailers setting a dangerous precedent for new buyers?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question, the one that we've been grappling with some of these gun control advocates for some time. So the story kind of goes back to 2018. Andrew Ross Sorkin, he's a writer for the New York Times, and proposed this idea that with enough public pressure, you could get the credit card companies to deny your ability to purchase a firearm with their credit cards. At the time, Visa, MasterCard, American Express all said they wanted to have nothing to do with this idea. That as long as you were making a lawful purchase with your credit card, they didn't want to know what it was. Well, there is this code in the background of your purchases with a firearm. So when you purchase with anything with a credit card, when you go to purchase something with a credit card, depending on the type of store it is tracked by a certain code. And some of those codes are used for some things like what the Treasury Department has with financial crimes enforcement. So what the idea is that firearms had always been coded under the category of sporting goods. Well, that also includes soccer balls. That also includes, your baseball bat, and it also includes, hunting decoys and new waders and everything else that you want to buy. Well, there was push by Amalgamated Bank, which is a woke bank, and there was also push by some of the Democratic lawmakers in the Senate and the New York governor, the New York Attorney General, and New York State Assembly all sent letters pushing for this special code specific to firearm retailers. That was pushed up. It had been proposed 3 different times by the International Standards Organization, which is based out of Switzerland, and it had been denied. Well, this one time it went up. It was a tie vote. It didn't go anywhere, so they pushed it up to the next higher level, and by and large, they went very quickly and approved it, and now they are setting the standard for having the special code that applies just to firearm retailers. So think of it this way. You go into the gun store and you want to buy, say it's a big box retailer like Academy or Cabela's, and you want to buy a new set of waders and you want to buy a bunch of decoys, and you got to have the next best call and all the rest of the cold weather gear that you're going to need for laying out there in the middle of a marsh to be able to shoot the ducks as they're coming in. And while you're there, you want to buy yourself a new shotgun and a flat of ammunition, which any of us who are buying ammunition these days knows it's not cheap, especially when you're talking about alternative ammunition that you have to use for waterfowl. So let's say you're going to buy $5,000 worth of gear because you want all the new best stuff. And of that, it's maybe, $800 for a new shotgun and, a couple $100 for a flat of ammunition because we know it's not cheap. Well, that could all get reported now under this one code that says, hey, Visa says that they noticed that you had a $5,000 purchase and it was at a firearm retailer, and that possibly could be something that's out of the norm for you. You don't spend $5,000 at a pop. And so now they may want to report that over to the U.S. Treasury, who could turn that over to the FBI, and now they can start to look into it to see, are you someone who is planning on committing a crime, something that's horrific like we saw at Uvalde? And that's the impetus behind this, is they say they want to stop these things. Really what it is backdoor looking at you and possibly putting you into a category of someone who is going to be on the government watch list. And that's the scary part, because all you're doing is exercising your Second Amendment rights. You're also being invaded, your privacy rights are being invaded. So we're actually working with members of Congress right now to draft legislation, give a legislation push that will tell the credit card companies they can't do this. 23 attorney generals have written to the credit card companies telling them that if they go ahead and do this, if they enforce this the special code on firearm retailers, then that could possibly be violation of their state laws, and that they will take them to court. So there are a lot of legal issues that go around with this. The credit card companies have responded back to Congress and said they didn't ask for it. They don't want to be involved with the purchases. The banking CEOs testified to this, but yet they're not stopping this from going through. Simply put, the credit card companies could simply tell the ISO that they don't agree with this, and they're not going to enforce this code. And that's something that we're really concerned about, because it affects not only our industry, but affects our customers and affects their privacy and their Second Amendment rights.
It certainly is a slippery slope, that's for sure. Phil, let's talk about gun safety. What strategy does NAGA employ to promote gun safety amongst its members, including new gun owners, and what training resources do you currently offer?
Sure. And I think my camera is acting a little funny here. So here I am. And I just want to mention something that I should have mentioned previously. We have probably over 2,800 military and law enforcement members in our organization. They are chapter presidents. They lead our organization on a daily basis, and we're very proud of that. We have Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, you name it, we have it, as well as active law enforcement. So just make sure that was added to my commentary. In terms of safety, we are very, very careful. You just can't come into the National African Gun Association, grab a gun, and run out into the range. We're going to stop you immediately, but you have to sit down. You have to go through a process called the New Members Orientation Class, an NMOC. And in that class, we go over the 4 universal rules of safety. We talk about what is good or bad gun management as a whole. Mm-hmm. And we talk about the organization and what the standards, the high standards that we have for every member, because you are a responsible gun owner. We try to make sure that everyone that joins our organization has that mindset. Now, having said that, we have partnered with Project Child Safe, which is an organization that promotes gun safety in terms of gun locks. We have over 50,000 gun locks that we have dispersed over our organization. And we have just a really continuous flow of information that we continually give to our members from a safety standpoint. Because the one thing you want to be able to implement and have in your mindset when you walk onto that range before you do anything is safety, and more safety and more safety. And that's something that we've been very, very good at exercising. A lot of our chapter members, our chapter presidents or leads, are certified instructors. In fact, all of our organization's official meets is led by a certified instructor. NRA, USCCA, NAGA has instructors that are certified as well. And that person, he or she, leads that particular effort when they go out into the range. You'll never see our organization have a gathering of folks just shooting, haphazardly with no one who's a certified instructor. And I think that's the reason why we've never had any accidental shootings. We've never had any issues because we are very, very by the book the way it's supposed to be done.
And how many people go through your training sessions in any amount of time in a year or so?
I'll give you an example. We average anywhere from, let's say, 800 to 1,000 new folks every month from all over the country. We have members in every state. On average, and each chapter has their own NMOC. You might have anywhere from 5 to 10 to 15 people, depending on how large that size of folks that have joined the chapter for that particular month. But it's typically done on the third Saturday of each month, from 10 to 12. And it's very, very focused and organized. So we're very, very careful about safety because we don't want anybody accidentally shooting themselves.
Of course. And we're going to go on to another subject here too. Phil, part of the stigma around guns around African Americans can be traced to high rates of gun violence, particularly affecting young Blacks and those who live in poor or urban areas or communities. Blacks die from gun violence at more than twice the rate of whites, according to data from the CDC. Can you dive a bit more into this and how minority gun owners handle this balancing act?
It's a tough act. Let's be candid. Let's be honest and have that. Just put it on this is family, so we're going to talk like a family. It's a very tough discussion, a tough topic. But what we try to do at the National African Gun Association is be very pragmatic. We try to be intuitive. We try to look at what's ahead of us and what we have to try to re-educate folks on, first of all, proper gun use. You don't walk around with a gun tilted sideways and all this other stuff. So that education and the safety process is in place. But more importantly, one of the things, if you look at our website, look at our organization, we try to, there's a concept or a statement, perception becomes reality. And what we've done, if you have a bunch of negative pictures of African Americans with guns, gang related, all the negative stuff, then after a while, people will typically kind of think that way subconsciously. So what we've done in our organization, we put out a constant flow of positive, very patriotic, very family-oriented pictures of folks shooting, moms, dads, grandmothers in some cases, the youth, your children, women, all in very positive pictures, doing really good things at the range. And I think what's starting to happen, it's a slow bleed. We're starting to have folks understand that there's a new presence of African Americans in the fray now, and that we have really good gun skills, and we're trying to do it the right way. So it's a continuous process of growing and fighting that image, and we fight that image by giving very positive imagery within our community and outside the community, obviously.
I love it. Mark, switching back to NSSF for a minute, NSSF's current advocacy efforts as it pertains to hunting, and you guys denounced the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's final rule, which offered hunters a bait and switch deal that banned the use of traditional ammunition for open 18 national wildlife refuges for new hunting and fishing opportunities. Please provide the backstory on this and how it's leaving the door open for further bans.
Yeah, great. I appreciate you asking that, Lauren. I'm actually going to go back and take a second here to answer some of the comments that I'm seeing pop up on the side. To Richard Hill's concerns about a USMC veteran not advocating for the most vulnerable in our society, when they're talking about our stance against some of these MCCs, I think it's important to understand that sometimes, there are those of us who have saved up for a time of our life to be able to afford some of the firearms that we want to be able to buy. And it's not uncommon to be spending $2,000, maybe $3,000. And I think some of those in the competitive shooting world will tell you that it's not uncommon to be spending north of $5,000 for a gun. So it does become a concern of privacy. When we go back to the question that you have about some of the final rules in hunting, so what we've seen is that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has done what we call a bait and switch, a little bit of a devil's deal, if you will, that they've opened up 18 new hunting and fishing opportunities in national wildlife refuges for you and I to be able to go out and do, to be able to hunt different species, to be able to fish in different areas. But part of that deal now is that you're also going to have to accept that they are going to ban the use of traditional lead ammunition or lead tackle in these hunting and fishing areas. And they're doing this on the basis that there may be a population impact to wildlife but they presented no scientific evidence to do this before. We saw this actually proposed back in the Obama administration. On the last day of the full day of the Obama administration, Dan Ash was the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service director, and he put out a rule that said you couldn't use any traditional lead ammunition on any federal lands. Dropped the order, walked out the door, shut the lights out. The first thing that Secretary Zinke did when he was Secretary of the Interior was roll that back and say that you can't do that. You have to have scientific evidence. So it's a bit of a devil's deal in that they're opening up more opportunities, which we want to be able to allow every hunter and angler to be able to get out there on the public lands and use the resources that they're paying for, because the conservation dollars that are funding this are coming from the firearm industry and coming from the angling industry, from the excise taxes that we pay through the Pittman-Robertson excise tax on the firearm and ammunition side, and from the Dingell-Johnson tax that's paid on the angling side. That's what's funding conservation. So when you say that you can't use lead ammunition, what you're really doing is pricing a lot of people out of the market. Traditional ammunition is much, much less expensive than alternative ammunition, which is also more difficult to find. 1% of all the ammunition that's produced in America today is alternative ammunition. That includes all your waterfowl ammunition for hunting ducks. You have to use that. You have to use either steel or bismuth or tungsten. A lot of hunters may well choose to use copper, but that should be a choice left to the individual unless they can show scientific evidence of detrimental population effects. And that's what we manage wildlife for, population effects. We don't manage it for the individual animal, because if you're going to ban hunting based on harm that you could do to an individual animal, well, then you just made the case to ban hunting altogether. And that's not a successful wildlife management tool. Hunting is an integral part of this. But when you price out hunters out of the market, when you're talking ammunition is going to cost 3 to 5 times more than your traditional lead core ammunition, you're talking about putting that price tag on that hunter who may only have just a weekend or two that they're able to get out into the woods, fields, or marshes with their kids and be able to introduce them to the hunting and shooting sports. And now you're going to be putting a further restriction on them that they may now forego the ability or forego their choice to get out there because now they've been priced out of that. So we have serious concerns about this, that is, in the long term, it's actually detrimental to wildlife conservation, and that they should be using sound scientific evidence to make their policies. And that's what the U.S. Fish and Wildlife has done in the past. And this is something that the Biden administration has promised, that they would base all their decisions on sound scientific evidence. And this one is not done with scientific evidence, it's done with the possibility that it may have this effect. And what's further concerning is that they've actually gone into this final rule and said that they're going to look at other national wildlife refuges to possibly expand this out further if they think it could possibly have further effects. So again, a very scary proposition when they're doing this without effects, and the detrimental effects it could have to participation and to hunting across America.
Yeah, that little word "may" often creates some huge issues. And I live in California, so we've been dealing with this very thing in our state for some time. And it's become very, like you said, it's priced us out of ammunition, and it's become very hard to find. So I understand. Phil, in June of this year, the New York Supreme Court justices in a 6-3 decision struck down a New York state law on concealed carry that restricted the carrying of handguns in public by most people. NAGA filed an amicus brief against the New York law, which said such laws often include arbitrary prohibitions on the carrying of firearms with parallels to New York's current law. Such laws invariably discriminate against the poor and minorities. Though this is considered a huge win, what are some of the challenges that still exist for Black gun owners?
And I just want to duplicate what you said. It was a huge win for anybody that's a gun owner in the country, because it now allows you to have the process of going and saying, if I want to carry a gun, concealed carry outside my home, I can do that. Having said that, within our community, there's like a double-edged sword. We have the right to do it, but now, let's be honest, can we afford to do it? In some cases, and I'm a Californian also, I was born and raised in California, attended UC Davis. They make it very, very difficult to own a gun. You might be able to qualify for the gun, but now you have to take a class which costs $300 or $400. In addition, you might have to get some type of certificate on top of that, which costs another $200 or $300. Next thing you know, that Glock 19 that was initially costing $450, in all real dollars is going to cost you about $1,200. So now that gun is out of your reach if you're coming from a community that has a limited budget. And a lot of our folks have a limited income. They are very pro 2A. They love the gun industry. They like the gun family, but oftentimes finances prevents them from getting a firearm to protect themselves. And especially if a lot of our women that are single with children, it's to me, it's paramount that they have the ability to go out and buy a gun. They're oftentimes left to defend themselves without a man being there. And I'm not trying to say a woman can't defend herself without a man. I'm not saying that at all, but it certainly helps when you have somebody else in the house with you.
Sure.
And when you're there to defend for yourself and not having anyone else, a gun is I think is a key essential tool that you need to have in every home in the United States.
Equalizer.
Absolutely.
Understood. Mark, now I'm going to go back to you for a second and hit on kind of a sensitive subject, not only within the hunting world, but particularly in the gun world. Ryan Busey, advisor to Giffords Gun Control, was recently appointed to the Hunting and Wildlife Council as an unaffiliated shooting sports interest representative. No one in the firearms industry was appointed despite the industry paying $15.3 billion to conservation. Tell us more about this and the ramifications of this appointment.
Yeah, so this actually comes out of a federal law. It's called FACA, which tells the the departments within the federal government that they can stand up advisory councils and advisory committees to be able to help them form policy that's going to be positive and move their departments forward in the right direction. So the Department of Interior and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is able to stand up a Hunting and Wildlife Conservation Council. And that group is made up of people who are stakeholders in this idea. So you've got what we like to refer to as the critter groups. You have groups like Mule Deer Foundation and Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. You have Pheasants and Quails Forever in there. But you also had this year, the announcement came out just about a week or so ago that Ryan Busey was going to be representing the shooting sports interest in there, and he was listed as unaffiliated. And I think that in all honesty, in the idea of being transparent, we need to be clear about who Ryan Busey is. Ryan Busey was a vice president of sales at Kimber Manufacturing. He used to work in the gun industry, and he left several years ago and has now since taken up work for Giffords Gun Control. So Ryan Busey is an advisor to Giffords Gun Control, and they've advocated for not just what some people may say could be, they say are common sense, gun control measures. And there are some things that we can all agree upon. We want the background check system to work the way it's supposed to. That's why NSSF has supported the Fix NICS Act. We want to make sure that firearms are secured when they're not in use. That's why NSSF has the Project Child Safe program. We want to make sure that mental health resources are available for those who are suffering through a mental health crisis. That's why NSSF has partnered with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention to provide those resources to ranges and retailers. But beyond all this, Ryan Busey has advocated for banning the most popular selling centerfire rifle in America today, and that's the AR-15, or what we refer to as the modern sporting rifle. There are over 24.4 million of these rifles in use today, and they're used for all sorts of purposes, all sorts of lawful reasons. And that includes self-defense in the home. That includes hunting and recreational target shooting. I use a modern sporting rifle, an AR-10 for my deer hunting. In the state I live in, Virginia, you cannot use an AR-15 or a 2.23 or 5.56 round to hunt deer, but you can use a larger caliber AR-10 version of that. I have hunted with my AR-15 as well. I've hunted coyotes and I've hunted varmints with that rifle. It is an effective hunting tool. And this is something that when we see a gun control advocate who is now being placed upon this committee as a shooting sports expert and interest, bearing the interest of recreational shooting sports enthusiasts to this council, it's disingenuous. And it's very concerning to us in the industry that someone who is openly advocating for banning the most popular selling centerfire rifle in America today is going to be telling this council what they should and shouldn't be doing when it comes to recreational shooting and hunting on public lands.
Yep. Agreed. Okay, Phil. So last panel question. Tell us where NAGA is headed, your expansion strategy, and how individuals can get involved today.
I think looking down the road, trying to be as intuitive as I can, I think that we are headed in a very good direction. We are getting very integrated into other folks within the 2A community. And that's something I kind of alluded to a lot of my friends after my Senate testimony. I think if we start combining forces, start exchanging ideas, we'll be a lot better off holistically from the 2A perspective. But the organization is definitely, we're continuing to grow. We have over 120 chapters. It wasn't 75 that was alluded to early on in the show. We probably will have over 150 chapters by the end of this summer. So we're growing very, very fast. the key point that I want everybody to really realize, NAGA is, I think, a reflection of the future for the country. In other words, a different kind of face is now coming to the gun table. Same goals, but we have just a slightly different look. And I think that's a healthy thing that everyone should embrace. Because bottom line, I'm a dad, I'm a husband who gets fussed at a lot, I tell you. My wife, I didn't take out the trash last night, and she was on my case about that.
Fair.
I'm an American. I love this country, and I love the folks in it. I love everybody, but we have to start working together collectively. And I think that's something the organization is poised to do, and we want to do, because together we're much stronger. And I mean this, we are much stronger as a single unit, singularly focused, as opposed to being out here on an island by yourself. That's why I was so proud when the organization filed the 6 amicus briefs that we've been able to do in conjunction with some of the other organizations, including Mark's organization. Because we believe in this country, and we believe that folks in this country have the right to defend themselves. And that's not a bad thing. Doesn't make us a pariah. It doesn't make us some wacko in the corner. We're husbands, we're wives, we're Americans. And we have to make sure that image is constantly pushed out there, because the other image is being pushed down our throats as well. So I'm going to end it with those comments.
Understood. Well, that's the end of my questions for you guys, but thank you very, very much for being here and for helping out with this session for Meritorious. We really appreciate it.
Thanks
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, if you can hear me before you can see me, this was fantastic, and I really appreciate it. I do have a question while I'm puttering here with my camera setting. But okay, so I am someone.
I lost her.
Yep, I think we lost you, Catherine.
Is she on mute? Yeah.
Catherine, we lost your audio.
Can't hear.
Working on it. Let's have a beautiful screen without my face. I think that works just as well. Okay, so let's not worry about that. I do want to show again that, so I have lived in Florida my entire life. I relocated to New York City. I think 15 years later, I could say that was against better judgment. But as we all know, the Supreme Court struck down the New York firearms regulation that would have required individuals to show proper cause. And in that, you have to demonstrate that special need for self-protection. That's for some reason they think, is a distinguishable form of that general community. And you need to do that in order to obtain a concealed carry permit in the state. We've all agreed that this is a burdensome rule. It's made it impossible for ordinary law-abiding citizens to legally carry a concealed firearm outside of their home. It's very difficult to even have a firearm in your home. And Philip made a point earlier that, we have the right to defend ourselves. Ironically, New York City is a duty to retreat state, but we won't go into that. So in spite of the recent ruling, New York just passed a slew of regulations. So they're at it again. They're not giving up. And what they are saying is licensing and other provisions related to firearms. I think that they're even more subjective, restrictive than the proper cause requirement. So now instead of a proper cause to obtain a concealed carry, you are now required to possess good moral character. And this they define as having the essential character, temperament, and judgment necessary to be entrusted with a weapon and to use it only in a manner that does not endanger oneself or others. And I think this standard is incredibly subjective. It's failing to create a clear path for law-abiding citizens to bear arms. I'd really like to hear Mark and Philip's thought on this, please. We'll start with you, Mark. Phil, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump in if you don't mind, Phil. It's yeah. So to hear you say it out loud, I don't mean to be disrespectful to it, but you have to laugh at the audacity of the New York State lawmakers and the governor to go ahead and put in a law like this immediately after they were told by the U.S. Supreme Court that their law that they had previous to this was blatantly unconstitutional, right? So now, on top of all those things you talked about, Catherine, they also want you to submit 3 years of your social media so that they can look into your social media history to make sure there's nothing in there that would concern them that they may, not give you a concealed carry permit. Again, so the Supreme Court in Bruin said that they couldn't have subjective criteria. It had to be objective criteria to be able to say whether or not you could have a concealed carry permit. They went ahead and wrote even more subjective and even more hurdles into it. So again, this is something that's going to be ripe for challenge. We believe that there are already cases that are being built to challenge this. And unfortunately, it's going to take those type of challenges, people standing up and demanding their rights and demanding that the state law and state law enforcement, the state government, and the federal government follows the law as it's written, that they can't just make it up as they go.
I think Mark hit it out the park. I mean, he hit everything that I was going to say, and I'll add this to the conversation. We need to understand that I think long term this stuff is going to get thrown out. To Mark's point, I think the Supreme Court justice, the way it's currently constructed, I think they're going to side on the side of gun owners. So don't panic too much. But we still have to be diligent. We still have to make sure that we are fighting these crazy laws and the audacity of the governor to literally get up the next day and make statements that were just, I mean, to me, anti-American, and going against what has been ruled legal by the Supreme Court in the country is really, really troubling. And I think some folks think that they have their own little fiefdom where they can make up their own little rules and laws as they go along. But that's not American. That's not the way we work. Gun owners have a right. We have a right to protect our families. And we need to understand that and make sure that agenda and that perspective is pushed out to the general public in a very positive, legal, law-abiding way. But we need to let them know this is our right. The Second Amendment's not an option. That's our right. And folks died for us to have this right.
Excellent. All right. Well, it's safe to say, whether you guys were joining today as new gun owners or longtime proponents of our Second Amendment rights, we all learned something new today. Lauren, thank you for moderating, and thank you, Mark and Philip, for sharing your expertise today and your incredible achievements within your organizations. To round out the remainder of the hour, we open our virtual tables for networking, so you can chat with the speakers one-on-one. So we only have 15 minutes left before 1 o'clock in our next panel. You can drop into the table to meet Mark for 10 minutes or so, Philip, and Lauren as well. The little logos on the table, so you can easily find them. And then we'll see you at the top of the hour for our next panel, Lethal Means Safety and Suicide Prevention. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Kathy. Thanks, Lauren.